Okay, good morning, welcome back. Right now, day 5 Project Busa build. This is the daft project, as I say, it's time to turn this old Generation 1 Hayabusa into a rat rod calf racer, if we ever get there. Right, for day 5 I want to do the rear wheel bearings, but as you can see, first of all, some more parts have arrived. The stuff's all rolling in, it's all part of a big massive order that's kind of in the region of £850 for absolutely everything, and it's rolling in on back order as it comes along. There's still quite a few bits outstanding, but today we have a Hell brake hose for the rear. The rear brake hose is rubber, it's cracked, and the banjo's rusty, so that's obviously going in a skip. A Hell brake hose for the rear. I need a twist grip. The twist grip tube itself just feels horrible. It could be split inside. It doesn't feel very nice. It's all crunchy. So I've ordered a new one with the grip attached, all ready to go. And as is the way with Remoto, they send you a genuine one. If they haven't got a patent one, if they haven't got an alternative, they just get you a genuine Suzuki one. So that's it from Remoto, and cheaper than from Suzuki, obviously. The remaining 2 brake and piston seal kits, I had 10, if you remember, out of the 12 that I needed. So there's remaining 2 kits. And as you remember in a previous video, I think it was 3, I attempted valiantly to try and get this disc faced off. This is a scrap disc. I really must repeat this. There are several people who like to skip video and they don't pay attention to clearly what's said. This disc that I tried facing off in my little lathe was just a scrap disc. It was always going to be a clock face or a garden ornament or a frisbee or whatever. It was never going to be used on a bike. But if I could have faced it off and some miracle had happened and I've got a lovely face on, I didn't even know how it would work, but I learned so much from you guys, so thank you for all of that. The guys who said you have to turn both sides at once, you have to grind both sides with, you can turn them on a lathe, you need a special tool for it. I don't have that, I just did it in the normal way, tried to face it off. It chattered to death, so clearly it was never going to work, but I learned a great deal from it. And it was always scrap, and it remains scrap, so that's going to be a clock face project in the future. And as I've obviously got to do, I've got a rear one, so there's a rear wavy disc. Now the front disc, again, I inherited some almost brand new Delboy wavy discs on the front, which is awesome and stunning and amazing, but the rear disc is truly toast. It's below minimum, it's 3mm thick, and that's just not going to work, so that has to be changed, and there is a new one. So I'll talk to you about that when the time comes. That is a lovely piece of kit. It's not a fancy posh EBC one or anything, it's a Sifami or something. I'll show you when the time comes, because the rear end's got to have lots of different jobs done. Today rear wheel bearings, but while the back is out, it's going to be not just rear wheel bearings, also disc and caliper and brake hose and the sprocket on the other side. And then of course once the wheel is out, then there's the swing arm bushes, and then there's the shortening bushes, and it all goes down the line. It's a project, and today rear wheel bearings. So let's put all this in the stock drawer. Let's get on with it. Right, as you saw, the state of these fasteners is quite bizarre. This bike has had an element of care. When you start looking around it investigatively, you can see the chain is nicely lubricated and it's reasonably well adjusted. But I did get it from a dealer who was selling it as a trade-in, so they have to make sure. So maybe they lubricated the chain. And there isn't really any signs of rust on the chain, so maybe it's always had some sort of lube on it. There's no auto luber on it, anything, no Scott oil or anything. It's just had an element of lube, so much in fact that it's all around the tyre and all around the wheel. But look at the wheel nut and those adjusters, bright red with rust, you know, powdery rust that's coming off it. You know, we do live near the sea here, but this looks like it's lived in the sea. It truly is bad. So as a precaution, when you do anything like this, before you put one spanner across the first nut, is lube everything up, get some penetrating oil into it, go and have a coffee, chill out for half an hour, and then hopefully when you come back, using care and consideration, you will be able to get everything undone without mincing, stripping or snapping anything off. But even then, there are no guarantees. So I'm going to give that about half an hour for all that WD-40 to soak in a little bit. And yes, I know that other products are available and I should have used this instead, but however, that's what I have in the cupboard. And once it's done, hopefully I'll be able to get all that undone, rip the wheel out and throw it on the bench. Wish me luck. Right, okay, penetrating oil, let that work. Once that's done, wire brush it off and get some grease on it, because I'm going to turn that lock screw or that lock nut all the way off so that I can adjust the bolt all the way in and give me some space so I can push the wheel forward and get the chain off. But at the moment, I'm just worried that it will move at all. That was so rusted, as you saw. Get the best fitting spanner I can, and it's an open end of fit at this point on that lock nut. Normally, just undo that, job done. But that, if it's seized, I might need another method. Let's see if this works first. Oh. You can see the spanner start to slip, so that will just chew it. One more try gently. No, that's not moving. C solid. Right, let's try the other side, otherwise it'll be plan B. Nope, that is going nowhere. Right, plan B. There's more weirdness. All the caliper fasteners, loads of anti-seize all over them, and just came straight out, no problem. And yet the wheel adjusters are seized. Completely seized. Oh well. Old bikes, eh? Right, now, I've tapped the axle with a piece of wood and a soft mallet to get it to this point where its thread is flush the other end. Now I've got to pull this out, and it really doesn't want to come out because obviously the chain is still under tension because the tensioners won't move. So, trick. Remember these little pipe grips? They're not actually pipe grips, they've got no serrated teeth, they're smooth, and as you can see they're straight and in the shape of a spanner. So all you do with them, open them right up to their largest, pop them on the flats of the axle, these two flat shoulders on the head of the axle. For goodness sake, don't ever grip on the axle itself. Right, little wiggle, it's moving. It's coming. Right, that's it. Got that out. Okay, let's lift the wheel and slide the axle out. Right, okay. That's one dirty old horrible wheel. And the first thing I notice about it, obviously apart from the fact it's got a 200 section tyre fitted, is that whoever decided to do that, I never like to denigrate the previous owner or the choices and decisions of other mechanics. That's unprofessional, not cool, and it just isn't necessary. But I look, I observe, and I make decisions. This is a 200 section tyre. I guess people put them on because they look cool, probably firstly and foremostly, and after that, if there is any form of handling advantage, then I've yet to understand it, or I don't really think there is one. But ultimately this tyre was an unwise decision by the last person who fitted it, owner, mechanic, whatever it might have been, and I'll show you quickly with a close-up of why putting this tyre on this rim really was a bad decision. I'll show you. You can see it, but looking around this lip edge, there it is there, check this out, this bruising on the lip edge of the tyre here, it doesn't go all the way around, but it is there. As you can see, this kind of twisted pattern on the edge all around there. It does go more or less all the way around. There are areas where there's no damage, but definitely here you can see that clearly in the light. There are little bruises in the rubber right on this lip edge, and if I turn this over and look at the other side, you can see the other side's absolutely immaculate. It's even got a little bead on it, and that's how it should look. So clearly that contact has been with the chain. I just don't want a 200 section tyre that's kissing the chain now and again. I want it to be a 190, so I'll change that when the time comes. Anyway, we've got 3 bearings to take out. There's one in here. That's the sprocket carrier. There's a bearing in there, and there's 2 bearings in the rim. So let's do this one first. Here we go. Cleaner than a joke on children's hour. Right, there we are. That's the sprocket carrier bearing done. Now let's do the 2 in the wheel. Right, okay, I just want to answer this question before I go any further. I picked up on some jibber jabber elsewhere on social media whining that why am I replacing all the bearings on this bike, something like 16 bearings, why am I doing that when I don't necessarily need to? Well, believe me, I'm only comfortable to ride this bike up the road when I've done them all, and I'm absolutely happy about that. A lesson I picked up recently from a buddy of mine, Keith, at the Amateur Bike Builder. It's a YouTube channel, I'm going to put a link underneath. I want you to just go over there and check his channel out. He's doing a high Busa with a stretch swing arm and some candy flip paint. He's a great guy, just doing it in a home garage. He's a good friend of mine, and he had an experience recently on his touring bike. His rear wheel bearing exploded. It just disintegrated on him into a million bits inside the hub. It just looked like a hand grenade had gone off in there. Busted, shattered metal, like shrapnel all over the place. I've only ever seen it once before, but it can happen. And when it happens, the back wheel goes out of line completely, and the rest can be disastrous. He's an experienced rider. He got away with it. He kept the bike upright, he managed to get it home, and he managed to put a new bearing in there. But it's a nasty lesson to all of us. At what point is a bearing worn out? Well, if it's your bike and you've ridden the bike since new, well, you can pretty much say that if you've taken care of it, you know how you've taken care of it, it's a known quantity. This thing, to me, this is an absolutely unknown quantity. I do not know what on earth I'm going to find when I get stuck into this bike, honestly. And that's why I'm doing it all, for peace of mind. That hopefully answers that silly question. This is the rear central wheel bearing, and there's play in that. I just pulled that one out, that's what reminded me. So if there's play in that bearing, the actual bearing, the inner ring has got a little bit of free play. That's starting to wear now pretty nasty, and it's the central bearing. The outer sprocket carrier bearing is the big one, and the one on this side are okay. So the wheel itself hasn't got any lateral play whatsoever. So you wouldn't have known anything about that until it was really bad. Now, okay, you can't go ripping your wheels out, pulling the bearings out just to check them, because once you've pulled them out, they're knackered. You need to put a fresh one in, they're single use. But you can take care, and just be sure that if you're doing an old bike up, why not take care of business like this before you start faffing around doing silly makeovers to the way it looks, which I'll get to later, because that's the fun part of the build. But for now, I'm taking care of the important stuff. I'm replacing every single one of the bearings. 5 wheel bearings, 2 headstock bearings, 3 swing arm bushes and bearings, and 8 needle bearings down inside the short link. So every single bearing bush and seal I've got on this bike is completely brand new, and I know how old it is, and it was fitted properly to my standard that I'm comfortable with. That's the answer. And when you see pictures of wheel bearings that are just shattered and broken up, you don't take chances. It's a thought on it. Okay, just to make that point one more time, to anybody who doubts why I'm replacing the bearings, that's why. I didn't know that that was like that. You can't see it from the outside, and there was no play whatsoever in the wheel. Okay, so there we are. That's why. Nice and smooth at least. Okay, just lining up the press to press the bearing in nice and gently, nice and straight, ready to go. Now in the last video I made the comment, I made the advice, if you wish, to line up the top one straight and underneath make sure that the socket is pressing against the hub and not the disc, it's not cocked off to one side and it's not down in the hole. Many of you said you should support the bearing inside the hole, because if you push down on this bearing and you're supporting the hub only at the bottom, you can actually push the bottom bearing out slightly. Yes, indeed you could do, certainly with a press. I'd say that's great advice if you're using a hydraulic press. You've got no feel, you've got no sensitivity, you don't know how much you're physically pushing on that, you can't feel when it goes tight other than that stops at the handle, and that's a lot of force. And yes indeed, then you could pop the bottle bearing out slightly, then you've got to come back over and press it back in, it all gets a bit messy, and you're also pushing on the inner side of the bearing because you've got that tube in there that pushes on the inner rings. I always do it this way, but obviously I'm going to do it your way this time. So what I've got here underneath, that socket is inside the hub and it's pressing against the outer ring of the bearing, so it's supporting the bearing itself, as your advice was. Both ways to do it, either way works. Just go steady, don't lean on it. Monkey boy. Hold the bottom up, wind this one in. The beauty of these hand presses with a spanner is you can feel it go tight. There it is. You can feel it straight away. Right, there we go. That's perfect. Okay, now that spacer in there it should be trapped between the two bearings, not jammed so it doesn't move. It must have some movement. So basically no more than putting your fingers in and you should be able to move it. Push it one way, push it the other. You should get a little bit of resistance to it and absolutely no free play, and at the same time it mustn't be jammed so much it doesn't move. It needs a little bit of movement because that is the guide for your axle. So if it's a little bit out of line and it's jammed completely, you won't get the axle through. You'll end up, you see people hammering axles through because they've jammed the tube inside. Make sure it moves a little bit, just under finger pressure, but not so much there's any free play. Simple. Right, next thing, that one has the sprocket carrier on it, so that doesn't need a seal. I'll show you on the other side though. This one does. It's the same job as before. Now, this wheel spacer went in there. As you saw, I had to tap it out from the other side, so that's gacky and disgusting. So let's clean that before we put it anywhere near the new bearing. Okay, another spacer. There we are. Okay, before I try and put the wheel back in, I don't know how many of you have ever struggled to get an axle through because seemingly there's something in the way in there and it won't go past it, and goodness forbid, I've even seen people use mallets and hammer axles through. chewing up the threads on the end, because what happens is the spaces inside, which are free to move, and there's 2 of them in the back, obviously they can sometimes be just a fraction out of line. They only need to be 25 thou out of line, and that won't go through it, or wedge tight and won't go. So apart from cleaning it, which obviously you have to do because this thing's like hell on earth, that's disgusting. Once it's cleaned, I try and work it through there while it's on the bench. Just put the axle in and you're lining up the spacers as you go. Once everything's lined up, the axle goes in and out nice and easy. You know that when you offer the wheel up to the bike, you've got a big fat heavy wheel in this hand and an axle in that end, you can actually get it to go straight through. So it makes an easier job. Less stress, babies. Bit of WD-40 and a Scotch-Brite, and get all that corrosion and age and stuff off it. Nice and clean. Grease it up, and that will stop it getting in that state again. Thread included. Inside out. Right, don't matter which way it goes through, you're just trying to line up all the internal spacers and stuff. There we go. First time, straight through. No resistance, baby. Excellent. Now I know when I fit the wheel, that will slide straight through. Right, there we are, that's rear wheel bearings done. Tick, another job off the list, day 5 out of the way. Nothing's torqued up, nothing's aligned, and that ain't ready for the road at all, so please don't flame me on that. I'm just putting it back together so that if I need to, I can wheel it off the bench, stick it outside and put one of the other bikes on, or a mate comes around, needs something done. That lift must never be paralysed. That's how I have to work here, because I've just got one lift, one small garage, and that's the way it goes. But there we are, it had to go back in. It's nice to do a rounded video, finish it off, put the wheel back in, and I hope you gained a little bit from that. That's very corroded and rusty, and I think it's going to be the way for a lot of the bikes. So in some ways, these videos might help a few more of you who've got bikes that aren't brand new. You know, when you get all that corrosion and stuff stuck and won't move, I can cover all that sort of thing as I go. So I hope a bit of that helped you today too. So there we are, that's it, rear wheel bearings. Join us for the next one, and I'll do either swing arm bearings or short link bearings. I don't know, I'll see how I feel at the time. I've got them all here ready to go. Could even take the front end out and do the headstock bearings, don't know, but it's all got to be done, so it'll be coming up shortly. There we go, I hope you enjoyed that. Take it easy, ride safe. I'm going to update the board. I'll see you next time.